Well, guys, we are back for another episode of the Liberal Asshole Show, episode 58. So we only have 6 topics today because the last one's a big one. So, what are today's topics?
Ukraine is on the offensive. Abortion bans hurting women not getting abortions. Lindsey Graham wants to ban all abortions and legalize murdering women who are seeking abortions. And Dennis Prager is a misogynist. Dark Brandon and Cypher's systemic racism video.
So, anyways, it's been a while since we covered the Russo-Ukraine war, as when we last left off, oh boy, a lot's changed, as now Ukraine is on the offensive, and they took back all of the Kharkiv Oblast in the last 2 weeks or so since we last went on. And oh boy, it's a big chunk. To put in perspective, it's I think one of the sites, channels I watched, so it's 4 times bigger than London. And London's a huge city.
Nice.
Twice as big as Luxembourg. So
nice.
Yeah. So that's been talked about for the last few months that Ukraine was going to do some offensive in the Kherson area, which is south, more closer to Crimea. And they did do it, but it was very small, not really any gains. And since that first initial movements, nothing's changed if you see on the map down there. But oh boy, up north, looks like the actual offensive happened, and they took over all that. Near the red area that Russia controls, around that size in Kharkiv, and it is huge, absolutely huge. And it looks like they honestly played mind games and tricked Russia, because remember, everyone was talking about how the offensive was going to begin in the south, to the point we were wondering don't leak that stuff out. You don't want Russia to know that, and they were all moving their troops down there. Well, it looks like maybe
I remember that.
Well, it looks like it might have been a bluff. Trick them, do a minor attack down there to start off with, and the actual offensive's up north. Which, by the way, that trickery's happened before. That trickery has happened too, for any of you don't know. Even World War II leading up to D-Day, the Allies tricked Germany the same way. They made look like they were going to invade Calais, which is the closest part of the English Channel between the UK and France. They had dumb fake balloon armies and everything.
I remember that.
Gave out fake orders, making going to go that way, and it turned out they went the harder way down in Normandy. So trickery worked again, and of course, massive losses too by Russia. Now they've lost. They've lost 7,000 casualties or something like that, in the last month. Over 50,000. Nice. Do you know the Kyiv Independent on Twitter?
Vaguely, yeah.
I follow them. I look at them every single day. They do daily recaps on how many casualties Russia has lost. Even though, like we said before, you should take it all for a grain of salt. But according to them, they've lost up to 8,000 men in just the last month, and a whole bunch of other things. Hell, in the Kharkiv area that Russia fled from, they left a whole bunch of weapons behind and stuff too. So that shows how hasty the retreat was. And of course, as always, just like when they left the Kiev and northern areas, they found a whole bunch of war crime stuff they did. To anyone's surprise, no. So yeah, since the last time we covered, what do you have to say about all of this?
Oh yeah! Keep going, Ukraine! Yep. Keep the push and keep the fake outs, keep the push, and get these and get Russia out of your territory.
Yep. Absolutely amazing and all that. Complete surprise. Now, of course, I'm a little bit concerned about the southern part. What are they going to do now that the bluff no longer is a factor? Are they going to finally start moving down there is the question. So, yeah, just keep fighting all that. So, don't know if there's really anything else left to say about that. So now, let's get on to the next topic, which is...
Abortion bans hurting women not getting abortions. Ugh. Because of course. Of course there's things that's going to fuck women over, even if they're not getting abortions.
So, yeah, guys. As we all know, back in June, almost 3 months ago, the Supreme Court overruled Roe v. Wade, and a whole bunch of states have banned abortions and all that. But, as we covered on the show numerous times about the lack of ability to get abortions had led to a lot of women suffering horrendous consequences to the point of dying, which is absolutely pathetic when this wouldn't have happened. Now we have news how it's affecting women who are not even getting abortions. But of course, conservatives expecting to care? Oh no, of course not. So
They have no capacity to care until they get affected sometimes.
Yep, so now here is Mike's video on it.
Since Roe v. Wade was overturned, I've been trying to share stories that demonstrate how it doesn't just impact women who want abortions, even though obviously that is indeed the case and that's still wrong, but it also impacts women who want to have babies, but unfortunately they have miscarriages, and then in order to get the procedure to remove the fetus, doctors are really apprehensive about that in certain states, like Texas, for example, because they don't want to be accused by the Texas Attorney General of doing an abortion on a live fetus, since the procedure to remove the dead fetus after you miscarry is functionally the same type of procedure. So it absolutely affects women who don't want abortions necessarily. But on top of that, there's a new story that I wanted to read. Actually, it's not necessarily new. It's several weeks old, but I think it's really important. So it demonstrates a way that these GOP lawmakers maybe didn't anticipate. It affects women getting access to life-saving medication.
They never care. Never have, never will.
Because conservatives understand women's reproductive shit? Hell no. You know they don't know or care about that crap.
Yeah, exactly.
Medication that is used to treat cancer.
They want girls to carry kids older than them.
Which is cringe because we covered that story months ago when that happened. Ugh.
Yeah.
Rheumatoid arthritis, even ulcers. Now, the reason why women's access to this type of medication, these types of medications in particular, is complicated because of abortion bans is because these medications could cause women to have issues with their pregnancy. So, in the event you have this medication and a GOP attorney general in Louisiana, for example, says, are you taking that medication for your illness, or are you taking that in order to have an abortion? Now doctors are worried about this. Pharmacists are a little bit more concerned about prescribing this. So let's get to the story here. So this is from the Washington Post. Medicines that treat conditions from cancer to autoimmune diseases to ulcers can also end a pregnancy or cause birth defects. As a result, doctors and pharmacists in more than a dozen states with strict abortion restrictions must suddenly navigate whether and when to order such drugs, because they could be held criminally liable and lose their licenses for prescribing some of them to pregnant women. Even if they can show their patients suffer from conditions such as rheumatoid arthritis, some doctors worry they could be prosecuted for prescribing such drugs to a patient with an unintended pregnancy. Such patients are also at greater risk because they can no longer seek abortions in their home states should they accidentally become pregnant while taking such drugs, no matter how grievous the injuries to the developing fetus. So
do you understand, viewers? Because of Roe v. Wade being overturned and all these states having strict abortion laws, now it's going to be very difficult to impossible for women to get drugs for a lot of this stuff, because it could possibly be used or cause a miscarriage or something like that. And in the minds of conservatives, miscarriage, no different than abortion, therefore you get prosecuted.
Yep.
Absolutely disgusting.
Let's let that sink in. If you live in one of these states and you're simply taking medication so that way you're not bedridden with rheumatoid arthritis, it's debilitating, it's crippling, but you're taking one of these medications and now all of a sudden your doctor is saying, I don't know if I can prescribe this to you, because what if you get pregnant? Then this can affect your pregnancy. This could harm the fetus. And then as a result, you might not be able to get an abortion on said fetus that is damaged as a result of taking this medication. So we don't want to be responsible in the event this turns into a criminal case. Now, there hasn't been a criminal case yet, but we're not talking about hypotheticals when it comes to this access for women being complicated. This is actually happening right now. For example, Becky Hubbard, 46, has decided to get sterilized so that she can go back on the only medication that has relieved her disabling pain from rheumatoid arthritis for the last 8 years. Soon after the Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade, the Tennessee woman said she got an ultimatum from her rheumatologist. If she wanted to stay on the treatment of choice for her condition, a drug called methotrexate, she was told she had to go on birth control despite her age and history history of infertility. Quote, "It is frustrating as hell," said Hubbard, a former nurse who lives in Johnson City, Tennessee, now waiting to see her gynecologist. "There are no reliable estimates of how many women like Hubbard may have had their treatment regimens affected under the spate of new abortion bans, but some patient advocates say they have received dozens of reports from people encountering obstacles in the weeks since Roe's reversal. Quote, "We were surprised at the sheer number of complaints from people with arthritis and autoimmune conditions who were having problems filling prescriptions for methotrexate after the Dobbs decision," said Stephen Newmark, Director of Policy and Chief Legal Officer for the Global Health Living Foundation, a nonprofit that advocates on behalf of people with chronic diseases. So I want to touch on additional details from Becky's story here, because this story really demonstrates how absurd these abortion bans are, and more importantly, how far-reaching they are. So this is a woman who is now going to get sterilized because she believes that that's the easiest way to get continued access to her medication for rheumatoid arthritis. If she were not able to get this medication, she says that she would be bedridden because she would be in constant pain. But because of this medication, she's able to live a semi-normal life. Like, not everything is perfect, but without this medication, her life would be much, much worse. And what's really absurd about this is she's in her 40s, and her husband have been together for decades, and she can't have children. They don't believe that they can have children. I don't know if it's her or her husband specifically, but for 2 decades they've been, having sex.
I guess the only thing I could say is you're 46, so in a few years you'll go through menopause. So hopefully after that you won't have to deal with this anymore.
If she hasn't already gone through menopause, she'll be short to menopause, and yet she's having to sterilize herself because these medications may affect pregnancies. What the fuck? Also, remember that in November, North Carolina's got the rule that got the thing that not only would ban abortions in all cases, so even life of the mother would not be covered, but also legalizes murdering women who are seeking abortions.
Absolutely disgusting.
And they haven't conceived a child. So the fact that
other states will probably
she has
try
to get
to
on
follow
birth control is really insane, considering the likelihood of her getting pregnant is minimal, and also birth control affects her health. So she was on birth control before, and she felt like it wasn't right for her. It affected her health in a negative way. But now she's faced with this option. If you want this medication, so you don't have to suffer from debilitating rheumatoid arthritis, you either have to get sterilized or get on birth control. This is why she's opting for sterilization. Do you understand how absurd this is? This is happening in the United States of America. We're not talking about some far-off, distant, newly democratized regime with, semi-authoritarian leaders who are, trying to cling to power and overreach and, clamp down on the civilization. Like, this is happening in the United States of America. Is that not insane to you?
That's the problem.
She has to get sterilized to get medication for rheumatoid arthritis because of abortion bans.
And this would be happening if Roe v. Wade wasn't overturned by you disgusting Republicans.
If this doesn't get pro-lifers to rethink their stance, nothing will. And unfortunately, this isn't going to get pro-lifers. And when I say pro-lifer, I should call them forced birthers because that's what they are. So I want to correct myself there. But they will never change their stance, even when it comes to stories like this, because they actually believe that abortion is murder. That's how insane these people are. One more story here. Claire Eby, who lives near Austin, has taken methotrexate since she was diagnosed with juvenile arthritis at age 4. When she was 18, her doctors tried to wean her off the drug, believing she was going into remission. Quote, "Things went down south really fast," said Eby, now 26. She developed inflammation in her eyes, which led to cataracts. The medicine that stopped her eyes from deteriorating further was methotrexate. Your health can deteriorate rapidly and also permanently if you stop taking methotrexate, Eby said. "My vision damage was permanent." Eby said she takes birth control, but her doctors also recently added a pregnancy test to the routine lab work she has to undergo to stay on the medication, a change that coincided with Texas's increasingly strict abortion restrictions. Quote, "They hadn't done that before," Eby said. So women have to jump through hoops to get medication that they rely on so they can live
never had to do
somewhat normal
either.
lives. Because of these abortion bans. This is what the forced birthers did. Are you happy? Still feel really pro-life, making these women jump through hoops, forcing them to get on birth control,
They use
take
the
pregnancy
thing of abortion to deny women health care because they're women-murdering misogynists.
And it all boils down to, they want to control women, everybody.
Yep, they want to control women and kill them.
To get their medication for arthritis. It's just so barbaric, so cruel. Now, there's a couple of other things that I want to touch on with regard to the story.
Who get off to the idea of murdering women.
There's a lupus patient mentioned.
They're jealous of Iran because a place like Iran and Pakistan where they literally stone women for being out of line.
And by the way, we're going to get to a misogynist named Dennis Prager very soon. And oh boy, it's going to be funny.
Schwartz, and the firm that owns her rheumatologist's practice, they put a pause on her methotrexate prescriptions. Now, she's lucky because she refilled right before this pause was put into place, but her life was in limbo. She was worrying, oh my God, am I going to be able to get this medication that I need to treat my lupus? A very severe autoimmune disorder. My sister suffers from this, and I know how serious it is firsthand. Now, on top of that, you have, in states with abortion bans, Walgreens has told pharmacists that they need to ask for diagnosis codes before giving out methotrexate prescriptions. Now, Walgreens is trying to follow the laws in these states, but at the same time, this is so cruel and so unnecessary. Now, I do want to point out here, as Marianne Price writes, anti-choice states are restricting methotrexate. It is available from Mark Cuban's pharmacy for 58 cents.
And murdering women.
Tablet with no insurance. Now, it does say that a prescription is required, so if you're unable to have it filled by Walgreens, this may be another possibly cheaper avenue if you are one of the people affected by this. But again, I just want this story to get out there because it's so absurd. Like when we visualize abortions in this country, not everyone, but a certain amount of people, forced birthers primarily, they always visualize it as women just like flippantly getting abortions at like 8 months. It's so preposterous. Like they have a caricature in their minds of women, but that's not happening. Even the women who need access to an abortion because they want to have one, it's not some light decision. Almost all women, they view this seriously. It's.
I guess we're going to have to bring up the stats once again, because all you conservatives always deny is, as you always do, you think that women use abortion for birth control, or just, like Mike said, flippantly do it whenever they want and stuff like that. No.
Not how this works.
Most abortions are done before 21 weeks, which is before Roe v. Wade had its limits. Roe v. Wade allowed abortions up to like 22 to 24 weeks or so. So 98.5% of abortions were done before 21 weeks. Those women that did that earlier are the ones that didn't want it for whatever reason. Now the 1.5% that are after 21 weeks, who knows how many of that's after like another 2 or 3 weeks where Roe v. Wade will allow. But late-term abortions, those are almost always, I guarantee you, I would honestly guarantee you, bet money on that all of them are because of a health condition that forces them to do
health defects in things like not properly formed skulls. Those don't have that. They're when basically there's no casing for the brain.
Like the women,
the kid's inviable.
Like the women,
and that doesn't jump until like 20 weeks or later.
The women that don't want the kid are going to get the abortion like ASAP. The ones that get it later on are the ones that did want it, but some health effects are forcing them to get it. It's not that hard to understand.
A lot of people, and hell, I know quite a few women. If it's like if it's like really late in the pregnancy, they'll birth the kid anyway, and then I've had them go preterm, or if it's a mental thing, a lot of them will try to put them up for adoption, or other family members will help raise them.
It's not something that they just choose to do. It's a significant procedure, which is why it needs to be safe and legal and done by doctors, not in.
And also that's for the birth control thing. Abortions is very expensive, and most places don't cover it insurance-wise. And abortions, depending on the state, can be several hundreds, if not into the thousands of dollars. And that's not including like traveling to these places, because a lot of these
remember that, for example, Kentucky has 0 abortion clinics, and other states only have 1.
Yeah, traveling, especially a state like Texas, where it could take like an entire day to cross one side to the other because of how huge it is. Like, this is not just something that women just flippantly do.
back alleys with coat hangers. But now, these bans are so strict. Republicans are so punitive, with these bounty laws and whatnot, that now doctors and pharmacists and corporations provide prescriptions to people like Walgreens. Now, they're restricting access to medications that women need, even if it has nothing to do with pregnancy, but just because these medications can affect pregnancies. This is the world that we live in, America in 2022. It's certainly not surprising, but it's still absolutely cruel and disgusting, and I will never stop throwing stories like this in the faces of pro-birthers who pushed for this. You did this. Own it. Take responsibility for the pain and suffering that you're causing right now.
And likewise, we're going to keep bringing up stories like these every single time until Roe v. Wade is brought back up. And of course, we're going to get on to our next topic, but beforehand, what do you guys say about this?
No surprise. There's all the side effects of overturning a Roe v. Wade. And don't forget, people in North Carolina, vote against the bill to criminalize abortion in all cases from 0 weeks and legalizes murdering women who are seeking abortions.
Watch that the Republicans in North Carolina will try to do what they're doing in Michigan, because they were going to have a referendum on making abortion legal definitely in Michigan, because Michigan actually has one of those laws in place where abortion would be banned.
Yes,
but
law.
Yeah, they have it on their books that abortion is illegal, but their Democratic governor is refusing to allow it to be done, not allowing it. So they're trying to do a referendum that would overrule that law to make abortion safe in Michigan. But of course, since it's polling by almost 20% in favor of it, Republicans are trying to block people being able to vote for it.
Of course.
So expect North Carolina to probably do the exact same thing in other states. Because guess what? As we saw in Kansas last month, when abortion access is on the table, it's going to overwhelmingly likely win. Because most Americans are pro-choice. Sorry to hear that, pro-lifers, but facts are facts. So now,
that's it. They're not pro-lifers. We're the pro-lifers. They're pro-birth and pro-women dying and being murdered.
They're pro-birth, pro-forced birth, and pro-death. So now, on to the next abortion thing. Hey, remember when Roe v. Wade was overturned? Republicans said, "Oh, it's just gonna go up to the states. Let the states decide on it." Well,
yes, I remember that. Well, Lindsey Graham decided to put the foot of his entire party in his mouth.
And decided to show why that it was all a lie, just like the Supreme Court idiots. So Lindsey Graham is proposing a national abortion ban after 15 weeks. Absolutely unreasonable, and the vast majority of Americans are against this. To the point, well, actually, I'll wait and hold my tongue because Kyle's going to bring it up too, but this is absolutely disgusting, but I'm not surprised either, especially from Graham.
All right, guys, so, Lindsey Graham made a wee bit of a strategic error, if I don't say so myself. And it's not just Kyle Kalinske saying this. There are reports that behind the scenes, Senate Republicans are furious with Lindsey Graham. Why? Because he proposed a national abortion law which would ban it at 15 weeks. So let me give you some specifics here. This is from the Politico article. Graham's abortion ban stunned the Senate GOP. His past, less conservative pitch won him some Democratic votes, but most Republicans stiff-armed him Tuesday as they face abortion rights backers ascendant after Roe's reversal. Lindsey Graham's anti-abortion legislation once unified the Republican Party. The 15-week abortion ban he pitched Tuesday had the exact opposite effect. The South Carolina senator chose a uniquely tense moment to unveil his party's first bill limiting abortion access. Since this summer's watershed reversal of Roe v. Wade, it was designed as a nod to anti-abortion activists who have never felt more emboldened. Okay, so let me pause here to tell you guys.
Anti-abortion activists want 0 weeks for all reasons, and they want to legalize murdering women who are seeking abortions and doctors who do them.
Yeah, like this, what Graham's doing, guys, doesn't appease anyone. The pro-life retards are not going to accept anything short of all abortions banned, so this is just a slap in the face to them. And likewise, we're not going to accept it either. So this appeases no one, and also, this is not going to pass anytime soon right now. Democrats control everything. It's not going to pass the House. It's not going to pass the Senate. at all, and then, God forbid someone does, Biden would veto it, and they don't have the numbers to override his veto. So this is not going to pass whatsoever. And I'm sure Kyle's going to bring it up too, but just as we saw when Roe v. Wade was overturned, how much it politically cost the Republicans, like they're probably not going to win the Senate at all right now. There's still a chance they might not outright win the House, because now it's starting to flip back and forth between them right now. Republicans, on that one thing, overturn Roe v. Wade, literally cost themselves a red wave. Just like that. And if they
shit.
And then if you do this, even just advocating, regardless if it successfully pass or not, you're going to make your chances even worse, because you guys are fucking insane.
The abortion activists, when you're drawing the line at 15 weeks, which they say is way too late. I don't know if you know this, Lindsay. These people want to ban it from the moment of conception. In their mind, the second you're done having sex, there's the third person in the room.
And then eventually they want to ban all sex that's not heterosexual and non-Christian. Remember?
I'll tell you exactly the only type of sex they'll be allowed. It'll be heterosexual, adult, married, missionary, or lasting between two consenting married adults.
Except the women don't have to consent. Remember.
Oh right, yes. Two married adults because they don't care about. Actually, no, not even adults, because a lot of them are pedophiles. So, and so yeah, they'll be like they'll say it's two consenting married, opposite gender adults.
Consent for women does not matter.
In a missionary position, lasting between 1 and 7 minutes for the purposes of procreation. That is literally the only type of... All other types of sex. So even if the woman's on top, that's sodomy according to them.
Yep.
For you to say we're going to draw it at 15 weeks, if anything, they're going to view this as a slap in the face to them. I mean, this is like, the left always calls for Medicare for all. This is like a Democratic politician saying, not even like, let's do Obamacare and call it a day and you guys should be happy, but saying like, let's do Obamacare, but strip out the best provisions of it, like the Medicaid expansion, and just force everybody to buy private insurance. You guys are happy, right? No, the left is going to be like, well, what the fuck? This isn't remotely what our position is, so why should we cheer you on? Now, it also has the effect of not just pissing off the anti-abortion activists, it also has the effect of pissing off the rest of the country, because at a moment like right now, support for Roe versus Wade, support for pro-choice legislation has skyrocketed. Even in deep red Kansas, they slapped down an abortion ban. 59% of the electorate did that.
Thank you for helping us, conservative retards.
Basically, any kind of national abortion restriction, no matter how tepid you might think it is, there's going to be a backlash to that, you jackass. They continue here and say, yet Graham's bill also attempted to skate past a Republican Party that's divided over whether Congress should even be legislating on abortion after the Supreme Court struck down nationwide right to terminate pregnancies. Struck down a nationwide right to terminate pregnancies. So, by the way, Rand Paul was on, I think it was Newsmax, and he was saying, I don't agree with this. I said leave it up to the states. I meant leave it up to the states. And some fellow Republicans said they were highly perplexed at Graham's decision to introduce a new abortion ban, more conservative than his previous proposals, at a precarious moment for the party. Quote, I don't think there's an appetite for a national platform here. My state today is working on this. I'm not sure what he's thinking here, but I don't think there will be a rallying around that concept, said Senator Shelley Moore Capito, a Republican from West Virginia. I don't think there's much of an appetite to go that direction. Graham's past pitches for a 20-week abortion ban attracted most Republicans' support and even the votes of some Democrats. His latest effort would leave in place state laws that are even more restrictive while also imposing new limits in blue states that currently have none. Okay, so let me break this down, because this was one of the first things that popped into my mind when he proposed this legislation. What he's saying is, we're going to do a 15-week abortion ban in every state. Anything above 15 weeks, banned. By the way, no exceptions. Rape, incest, etc.
Yep.
Nothing.
Exactly. Not even life of the mother at risk. He also says,
if you're a red state and you want to go further than that, I will allow it. But hold on. by that logic, shouldn't you also say the opposite? That, why is it
no,
the
because he's a hypocrite.
If they want to
he doesn't care.
have a law that's more restrictive...
Why should we be forced to restrict abortions, but states that are more restrictive than the 15 weeks are allowed to do even that? How about no? How about we're not going to do any restrictions on that regard? How about that?
It's okay, but if in the blue states they want to be less restrictive, no, that's not okay.
Yeah.
It strikes me as a wildly imbalanced approach, but of course that's the point. They want it to be a wildly imbalanced approach. They want to just add another national restriction. Now, by the way, if you tell me, hey, Kyle, you can either keep the status quo, so the way it is right now, where like half of the states are massively cracking down on abortion, and then half of the states are more lenient. Either you can keep the status quo, or you can have a nationwide system in all 50 states where abortion is legal for the first 15 weeks, and then after that, it's restricted. I would pick the legal for the first 15 weeks in every state, and then after that, it's restricted. Why? Because like 90% of abortions happen before that 15-week mark. But that's not...
I mean, he is right on that, but I don't really like to admit
I'd say go for early 20s.
Even that probably is too much for me, but 15 weeks definitely
what this bill does.
Early.
This bill says however many 20-plus states that are more restrictive, that's what's up. You can be more restrictive.
And then, of course, when they restrict health effects and stuff like that, that is definitely also
basically for all the blue states, we're going to cap it at 15 weeks. With, again... really no intelligent exceptions. So even Mitch McConnell, they go on to explain this in the article here, even Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said that he prefers this be handled at the state level. John Cornyn, Republican of Texas, suggested...
And by the way, McConnell's a lying piece of shit. He supported banning abortion when Roe v. Wade was overturned. We recovered that too. He's a lying sack of shit, but no one's surprised about that.
Graham had gone a bit rogue with this
by the way, guess what? Just a related abortion thing.
What?
Abortion has been fully decriminalized in my home state as of this year.
And weren't you
officially?
Weren't you like
we were the last state in Australia to decriminalize abortion?
So I guess it's the same in every single state.
It's kind of varied. The weeks are varied between 16 and 24, except for the ACT, which is no limit. And it's and there's certain restrictions after about 20 to 24.
So honestly, if you put Roe v. Wade back on, you guys are actually more restrictive than us in terms of weeks. In a lot of cases.
Yes.
Now I will also say, some people are arguing
in New South Wales, Queensland, South Australia, Tasmania, and Western Australia for them, because there's West Tasmania is 16, Queensland's 20, Queensland and New South Wales is 22, Western Australia's 20, and South Australia's 23.
Yeah, when Roe v. Wade was there, it's 22 to 24 weeks, no matter what.
The Republicans' chances in the midterm elections on purpose.
Oh yeah, that was a conspiracy theory too that I've seen when it came out, that a lot of Republicans think that Graham is doing this on purpose to try to tank Republicans' chances to win primaries in 2022.
Why?
Well, one of the reasons from why I said, because I think Kyle will cover, is that supposedly Graham made more money fundraising when the Republicans were the minority instead of the majority party. But even with that, I don't really buy that. I really think he wants to.
I think that's a hilarious...
Because, guys, I think Kyle's going to cover it too. These people, these pro-life retards, don't care about political practicalities. They don't care that they are the fringe minority.
It's all about oppressing, hurting, and killing women.
They don't care.
And yes, remember the North Carolina... And yes, I'm going to keep harping on this. That North Carolina wants to not only ban all abortion from 0 weeks no matter what, but also legalize murdering women who are seeking abortions.
Because they don't care about the fact that the vast majority of the country is against this. They don't care if it's going to cause some elections. They care more about the policy more than anything else. This is like life and death to them that they ban abortion. And if it costs them like political power, oh well. We care about the policy more than anything else.
Admission. First of all, I don't think that's what he's doing. I don't think he's purposely trying to tank the Republicans. But second of all, there's an embedded admission among all these elected Republicans here that our ideas are really unpopular. So you can't just like run on one of our ideas because that's going to hurt us.
Like it already did. But like I said, these people just don't care. The policy overrides anything else in their eyes.
Well, what does that say about your governing philosophy? What does that say? It's quite admission, because these people usually do not admit that their ideas are unpopular. They don't admit that.
It's evil.
But now, that admission is embedded in this. Okay, so quick correction, because I'm seeing this now. I had read other reporting that the bill does not allow exceptions for rape and incest, but this says the opposite, this Politico article. So they say, Graham's bill bans the procedure nationwide after 15 weeks of pregnancy, a priority of many prominent anti-abortion activists who have been demanding a far more aggressive response from the GOP. It includes exceptions for rape, incest, and pregnancies that threatened maternal health. Okay, so just quick correction. According to Politico here, they say it does allow for those exceptions. Now, having said that, let me jump ahead and play this for you. So during the press conference, he lays all this out, says what his plan is. There's a couple arguments here that I'm going to take exception with. But the reporter asks him, well, hold on now. I personally had complications at 16 weeks. And under your system, I wouldn't have been able to get help. Now, we've discussed this vis-a-vis Texas, right? Even if they have an exception, if the life of the mother is threatened, then, you're allowed to do the abortion. But what they don't tell you is, they mean you literally have to be dying on the table. That's what they mean, your life is being threatened. So if you know... Hey,
this has actually happened, too, in a lot of states that have these exceptions. They, even though you're suffering, they won't allow the abortion unless you're, like, literally about to die, which is a horrible policy.
Even then, they don't. Even then, some won't do that. They'll just finish you off.
Yeah, you could still probably face major problems or die still if you wait that long.
Hey, in 3 months you're going to be dying on the table. That's not good enough.
Breaking,
we're going to have to get you to a place where you're on the brink of death
murdering women is the point.
Give you an emergency
they
abortion.
love it. They get off to it.
Even a lot of these exceptions are not really exceptions. So this woman says, hey, I have, what about at 16 weeks when I had X, Y, and Z going on? He gives a terrible answer, so let's watch.
What would you say to somebody like me who found out that their son had an anomaly that would make him compatible license?
Let me get this ready. There we go.
I had regular appointments. I did everything right, and at 16 weeks we found out that our son would likely not live. When he was born, he lived for 8 days. He bled from every orifice of his body, but we were allowed to make that choice for him. You would be robbing that choice from those women. What do you say to someone like me?
Here's what I would say. The world pretty much has spoken on this issue. The developed world has said at this stage into the pregnancy, the child feels pain, and
now let me pause there to tell you that is not a hard science. There is definitely disagreement among experts in terms of at what line the fetus feels pain. Now, by the way, my standard, in all seriousness, I do think once there's pain in the equation, it's a different moral calculation. I do believe that, which is why I often call myself a moderate on abortion. But, my moderate stance is supporting Roe versus Wade, because it's a moderate framework. But he's saying it like it's a hard science and everybody agrees. That's not true.
We're saying we're going to join the rest of the world and not be like Iran. As to your particular case, there'll be exceptions for life of the mother and rape.
Now, when he keeps saying, he keeps saying this over and over in this press conference.
He doesn't.
I'm just asking to be like the rest of the developed world. Oh, you son of a bitch.
You do know that the developed world is less restrictive than us, even with Roe v. Wade. Just so you know that.
Yep.
There are a lot of places that are way better
that.
Why do you swat aside that argument when it comes to paid sick leave, paid maternity leave, paid vacation time, unions, higher minimum wage, universal health care, free college education? In every other context, Lindsey Graham laughs at that argument. Bernie has told him this in the debate to his face. hey, I just want to catch up to the rest of the developed world. And in every other context, he throws it out.
I think Graham still has PTSD over that debate, too. Because you can never beat Bernie in a debate. Always remember that, peoples.
Every other context. He's the only one where he's like, bro, common sense to catch up to the rest of the developed world. Now, by the way, that argument isn't even true in regards to abortion. You know, if you were watching this, you might think, well, in France, they do have a 15-week abortion ban. Read the specifics of the ban. Because they go on to say, if the physical health if the mother is threatened, they're allowed to get an abortion, but also the mental health of the mother. And who gets to determine it? I hope you're sitting down. The mother.
Exactly.
So in other words, the reaction under that system is, look, you're past the 15-week mark. You know, it's getting a little bit dicey. You should definitely take this decision seriously, but your call. Your call. So he's not even correct in what he's stating here.
Exactly.
Again, with us, exceptions.
France's 15-week is a lot more reasonable. Hell, the woman could even just lie and still get it later on if need be. That's a lot better than what Graham's offering.
And there's a plethora of evidence to this effect already that we've covered on this show. The exceptions are you literally dying on the table? And if you're not dying on the table, not good enough.
In some cases, it's not even that. Like, you have to already be dead before they'll do anything.
And of course, I don't trust Graham either. Or Republicans.
No, of course not.
Not.
He's a subhuman slime ball.
Abortions.
He might view it as a compliment, though.
After the 15-week period.
Actually, that's offensive to slime balls.
Like I said, about 90% of abortions
because
happen before
unfortunately, slime balls are actually useful in Minecraft.
To give everybody context.
We're resolved to get America back in line with the rest of the world.
He wants to ban anything that's not,
where America is
wake up,
until we
go
vote,
to church, abuse a
until
kid,
we debate,
go home,
and so to my Democratic
abuse
friends,
your wife, work for your capitalist, be slave to your capitalist overlord, and that's it.
We're a bunch of wackos.
Beep, boop, beep, boop.
You're the wacko, Graham.
Your idea is wacko, not ours.
Let's see. As we keep covering this poll, 19% of Americans want to ban abortion outright, and in the places that wanted like complete total abortion bans, as we covered when Roe v. Wade was overturned, most states it ranged from like 11 to 30% at most. So your policy has at best 30%, at worst like barely even 10% support, whereas our policy, well, not even my policy. The general thing about Roe v. Wade, over 50% of Americans support it.
Exactly.
And it was like 60 to 70% were against overruling it. At least 80% of Americans think abortion should be allowed in some regards. So we actually are the majority position here. You're the minority position here by quite a lot. You're a fringe minority in a lot of places. So that's why you need to shut the fuck up, fall in line, and don't advocate for your policy ever again. And yes, fuck off too.
Let's vote. Let's vote.
Let's vote. Hey, conservatives, you know what? Pro-life retards, you know what? Let's have a national abortion referendum, because guess what? We're gonna win.
You're gonna be completely and utterly destroyed.
We're gonna win so badly that you're gonna try and block the votes and the policies in the states that you have the good power to do so in. Oh, because you know you're gonna lose. Like
in the states they have control of, they're just not gonna have a vote.
Yep.
They'll just prevent any voting from happening at all.
Because they know we're going to
get crashed.
Give me a chance to vote on this bill.
And you
we'll take her considerations and we'll vote. Now, I guarantee if we have a debate on the floor of the United States Senate where we can explain what we're doing versus what they would do, we'll do really well with the American people. And over time,
you won't.
God willing, we're going to be like the rest of the world. And
did you see Kansas? We covered it last month.
Yep.
Have you seen all the polls? Have you seen
they won in a landslide?
Have you seen the midterms? Like now, Democrats are going to win the Senate when before that wasn't the case.
And even better, they might win the Senate by enough to counter Manchin and Sinema. And that could actually go over to the Republicans, and the Democrats would still be up something like 51 to 49 or 52 to 48.
Eat shit, Graham. I know you're being delusional right now, as all you conservatives are.
Not like Iran.
That's because Lindsey Graham's in the Twilight Zone.
He's like, we're not Iran. Your abortion views are very much like Iran. Hate to break the news to you.
Comes to abortion.
And also, if anything, I might look it up and see, because I bet they're even less restrictive in that regard.
Thank you.
Because more like something like Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, because Iran is actually more liberal when it comes to most Middle Eastern countries, believe it or not, despite all the propaganda that people keep telling you about.
Crux of his argument is, let's catch up to the rest of the developed world. Well, like I just described to you, if you really want to catch up to the rest of the developed world, do it. You can do it like France. 15 weeks on paper, but after that line, who's it up to? The mother. Is your physical health threatened? Okay. Is your mental health threatened? And who gets to make the call? You get to make the call. So really, that's not the case, right? And honestly, I might even be a little more conservative than the French system, but this argument of like, I just want to catch up to the rest of the developed world, it's literally the only context where he uses it. I wish he would use it for paid family leave, for paid maternity leave, for paid vacation time, for unions, for universal health care, for free college. On that front, he thinks that argument is absolutely stupid. Now, notice how he reacted to the question. It was obfuscate, and then just bash Democrats. So, totally unsatisfactory answer. But I got to end on this note with you. So here we go. Lindsey Graham, in August, said states should regulate abortion. Now, he's flipped his view.
I think states should decide the issue of marriage, and states should decide the issue of abortion.
I think we should have a law at the federal level that would say after 15 weeks, no abortion on demand.
I think states...
And this is why this absolutely is going to hurt the Republicans. Because all the headlines are national abortion ban, national abortion ban, national abortion ban. And they immediately went back on what they said their position was. This is what we call mission creep. That's what this is. And this is what we call... Sorry to make a crass analogy here. But this is just the tip. Just the tip, please, real quick. That's all I'm saying. Just the tip. Who, me? No, I just...
Because
look, my personal politics are against abortion, but, leave it up to the states. That's all I'm saying. Leave it up to the states.
15 weeks.
It was always a Trojan horse argument. It always was. Because in their heart of hearts what they want to do. And I got a bridge to sell you if you think, let's say hypothetically this passes, which it won't, but let's say it did. Do you think they're going to be done at 15 weeks?
No.
Nope.
Do you think they're
going to want to do North Carolina?
As I just described to you, this is not a bill that satiates the pro-lifers, not at all. In fact, they probably hate it just as much as the pro-choice people.
And doctors doing
They're not going to stop there. They're going to keep going further and further and further. And 15 weeks will become 6 weeks. And 6 weeks will become the moment of conception. And the moment of conception becomes no exceptions for rape and incest. And then that becomes, as already is the case, if your life is threatened, then you can get the abortion. But, literally, you need to be dying on the table. It can't even be a situation where we know you eventually will be dying on the table.
By the way, if you're seeking abortions, people can now murder you legally.
On the table. Mm-hmm. This is what they do. This is who they are. This is how they act. This is what they believe in. They believe in masking their real agenda every step of the way.
Yeah,
they know it's unpopular
because they
know it's
can't
pathetic,
do anything but lie,
and so they take the rough edges off. And such a good lesson about the states' rights argument, because if you look back at history, when does the right trot out the states' rights argument? Whenever they're trying to mask an indefensible belief and policy that they have.
Exactly.
The crux of the argument during segregation times was not a bunch of right-wingers going out there saying, I think black people are inferior. They didn't say that. Their argument was, look, my position is I believe in freedom for the states.
Yeah, guys, states' rights, for all you don't know, was a historical dog whistle to try implement racist policies without sounding racist.
Yep.
Which we're actually going to probably be getting to in a little bit with systemic racism from the cynical historian.
I believe you need to allow free people in a free state to make their own decisions. And in our state, which should be free, we say, this is our way of life. We have separate but equal. And if you don't like that, you're the bigot. This is what they did. There's always a very highfalutin rationalization and justification that people use when trying to cover up their shitty beliefs. And the Republicans are masters at it.
And this is what conservatives always do when it comes to states' rights. Oh, okay, well, us in liberal states, we want gay marriage. Oh, we want abortion to be less strict. And then they come up here trying to force their views on us.
Exactly.
So much for states' rights.
They are masters at it.
Of course.
It's just amazing when you splice it back to back and you see it that stark. Man, that hits different, doesn't it? Leave it up to the states. Oh, did I say that? I mean a national abortion ban.
And also legalize murdering women
I'm
who are seeking
I'm moderate
abortion.
on the issue of abortion. I think Roe versus Wade, the framework of Roe versus Wade got it right. Or the framework of Casey. So I'm not, totally closed off to the concerns of some pro-lifers. But you got to call balls and strikes here in terms of the politics of it. And the politics of it are abysmal. And again, they're going to pay for this at the ballot box because this is an issue where Democrats are crushing Republicans, and this only helps Democrats more. Ever since Adpocalypse.
Like I said, ever since that happened, Democrats have turned around where now they're winning the Senate by increasing the amount, and now Republicans are on track right now. If they do win the House, it might possibly be like just a flip in numbers. Like, the thing was like Democrats right now have like a 7-seat lead right now. It's that close.
Yep.
So it's look like right now maybe the Republicans, if they win, might get at best like a 7-seat lead. Like if they do win right now, it's gonna be a small amount. Whereas beforehand,
and as we all know, if they do win, all they're gonna do is just impeach Biden every single day,
and they will fail for 2 years.
Yep.
And also,
they're forcing literally nothing to get done, and they just spend all their time impeaching Biden. There's going to be like 50 impeachings at least.
And just so you all know, before Roe v. Wade happened, they were on track to win somewhere between like 50 to 70 seats, like to have that big of a lead. Now it looked like they might barely even get around 10, if that.
Yeah.
And if we keep it up, plus with this, who knows? Maybe we'll flip it, and then we'll actually increase the lead in the House.
Yes.
The Republicans would have no one to blame by themselves for overriding Roe v. Wade. If you kept that in, you would probably win. But hey, thank you for the free W's. It sucks that women have to suffer because you're a bunch of misogynistic POSs, but hey, we'll win and hopefully override the Supreme Court and get Roe v. Wade and stuff back together. So, fuck you in that regard. So now, on to the next topic.
And that is, Dennis Prager is a misogynist.
I think we've covered before. Dennis Prager, for all of you who don't know, he runs PragerU, which is a horrible YouTube channel that spews ridiculous, incorrect conservative propaganda and all that crap, and run by this man Dennis Prager. And oh boy, he did an essay recently that he wrote back in this year where he literally blames women for everything wrong in this country. Of course, guys, it's women's fault that America is fucked. Alright, let's see his arguments. This is gonna be funny. Oh, that's right. I already saw it before. I almost died laughing.
I haven't read this article, but I mean, let's take a second and appreciate that title. Women are disproportionately hurting our country.
Yikes.
Now, when was this written, you ask? 2004? 1983? I don't know. It was written August 30th, 2022.
By Dennis Prager.
Not even a month ago he wrote this. August 30th.
Wow.
Are you ready for some cringe, people?
Let me read you that title one more time. Women are disproportionately hurting our country. Dennis Prager is one of those
more than 51% of the country is causing the problems.
People. He just wants to be known for saying really stupid things, but the reason why he doesn't have as much clout as other right-wing commentators, despite the PragerU stuff because of the funding for that, but the reason why as a commentator he's less successful is because he is boring as shit. Nobody wants to listen to Dennis Prager. It's
he
he's
became
asleep.
A pussy trying to debate Sam Cedar recently.
He's trying to dig in his little chair there. Nobody wants to hear about Dennis Prager.
Off topic, I don't know what it is about Lance, Mike, and all, but why the hell do all these Twitchers always have to do dog cams in their videos? It's really dumb and stupid. Just Why? It's not necessary. Just focus on you. Don't care about the dog.
That's his cue. He's telling me to stop. He doesn't like Dennis Prager. Well, let's dive in a little bit. I haven't pre-read this,
Even
so if it has any yikes takes, then
these videos.
You've been warned.
I want
but
to
let's
hear about
see what he
politics,
has to
not
say.
see
I'm sure
a
he's
dog.
making a very... He's telling me to stop. He doesn't like Dennis Prager. But let's dive in a little bit. I haven't pre-read this, so if it has any yikes takes, then you've been warned.
Oh, trust me. I've already saw this video. It is full of yikesy things.
But let's see what he has to say.
Everything's yikes about it.
Persuasive and cogent argument. When I was in college, I read a book by George Gilder, one of the wisest thinkers of the last half-century, titled Naked Nomads, which had a deep impact on me. It was about single men and all the pathologies associated with them. For example, Gilder drove home the point that the biggest factor concerning violent crime was that it is overwhelmingly committed by single men. While there was no danger, I would say no chance, that I would commit a violent crime, though I was at the time single. This fact, along with others in the book, made me a lifelong advocate of marriage. Okay, what if there's like other factors that lead to violent crime, such as
poverty,
socioeconomic conditions,
exactly,
poverty, other things?
I already said that.
But
no, it's just if
conservatives
you're
don't
single,
believe that, remember?
You're going to be a criminal.
No, they think it's because the person is an end-slur, and because they're not worthy of being considered human beings.
Statistically, that's what this person argues, but aren't you like a little bit more intellectually curious, where you're like, maybe it's not that simple?
Intellectually
no,
curious.
It's Dennis Prager. Of course he's not. I also came to realize that raising good men was the most important thing society could do. If it doesn't, the male propensity to physical aggression and predatory sexual behavior will wreak havoc. Therefore, raising boys to control their natures is fundamental to society avoiding chaos. So he's starting off...
So how about that? Starting off misandrous, guys. Hatred of men.
Oh, wow.
Implying that us men can't control themselves.
Wonder how much he hates himself.
Oof. Now it's our fault, guys. It's our fault that society's bad because we can't control ourselves. Or maybe it's just conservative men can't control themselves, whereas us progressive men have no problem controlling ourselves.
Trying to pin blame on men, but really it's women who are disproportionately ruining the country. Over the course of a lifetime, however, I have come to realize that while society was right about males, it was wrong about females. Whether spoken or unspoken, most people thought that girls just didn't need to be raised to control their natures nearly as much as boys did. Okay, we're getting into some really, like, oof territory here. And I don't know where the fuck it's going to go, but right now...
Here we go. It's time for murder.
It's women's fault that men suck. Oof.
Oh, this will be fun.
Just stopped right here. I can't imagine what he's going to get into. Rape apologia, essay apologia. I have no clue. But, oof. It's true that females are not confined to violence or predatory sexual behavior as men are, but this hardly means that girls and women don't have to learn to control their natures. Okay, how so? On the contrary, as I have been telling parents for many years now, they need to teach their daughters to control their natures just as much as they teach their sons to do so. Okay, when you say control their natures, what exactly do you mean? Maybe he'll specify here, but that sounds really weird. Have you ever heard a normal human being say, hey, are you teaching your daughter to control their natures? I'd say, what the fuck are you talking about? What do you mean control their natures? Like, stop farting too frequently? Like, what does that mean?
Conservatives who want to group the girls to rape them or have their sons rape them.
Girls have to learn to control their emotions.
Oh, here we go.
Oh,
the old argument.
Trying to manify the women.
Yeah. Because it's women that need to control their emotions, not men who are very emotional about everything, especially sex, as we all know. Dude.
Well, we also remember that what men need to do, what a lot of men still need to do, is not control their emotions, because if they bottle it up, that's when it blows out violently. But we need to find healthier ways to get things like anger, stress, and that out.
But of course,
and I think this is something, when the deconstruction of toxic masculinity happened over the last 30 years, that's something that kind of didn't really happen. Didn't build up a healthier masculinity.
Yep, this is a very good example of toxic masculinity. Because conservatives want men to bottle up their emotions because it's only women that are allowed to be emotional. And then women are too emotional somehow. Like I said, once again, misogynistic
he just
and
wants throne. He just wants mindless, emotionless drones.
Okay, not guys.
That's
though.
all he wants.
Not guys. I
So
mean, he supports President Donald
them.
Trump, who just threw a temper tantrum on Truth Social the other day, where he made like
But Trump's
60
good,
plus
though,
posts
Mike, remember?
boosting
Donald
QAnon,
Trump's
sharing
having a
fake Ivanka
28,
tweets.
417
That's pretty emotional, is it not? So guys don't have to control their emotions, just girls. Can guys never get overly emotional?
No, Mike, you know that. Men are always perfect. Except when we're going to be misandrous about them. Oh my God.
I'm trying to figure out, like,
Trump's
what's
face.
the point?
Ugh.
Why is this, as he claims in the article, hurting the country? Government couldn't function if women were too emotional? Like I'm just trying to figure it out. Like, you can be emotional, and there can still be good outcomes. For example, like, you can care so much about healthcare that it makes you feel emotional when you think about all of the unnecessary deaths. You fight for that particular policy of single payer. So
they just want to beat up and kill them.
It's just, it's part of the human experience. So I feel like he's going to really have to do a lot of argumentation. You need statistics. You need anecdotes.
He won't.
You need
he never will, because he's just pandering to his misogynistic base.
Mike, they don't like evidence and statistics, but they do like their anecdotes. Oh, they love their anecdotes.
Do we think that Dennis Prager is going to provide us with that?
Oh, is it? Evidence is the plural of anecdotes, or something like that.
Just
that Lawrence Southern said years back to Destiny.
Overwhelm their conscious and their ability to think and act rationally. Emotions can do the same thing in girls and women. Overwhelm their conscious and their ability to think and act rationally.
So cringe.
Holy shit! This is wow. I'll just keep reading. However, it should be obvious that at least 2 generations of parents, especially among the well-educated, did not teach many of their daughters to control their emotions and think rationally. Maybe it's because people who are more well-educated don't actually view the opposite sex as inferior or defective inherently because of some dumb stereotype that you believe in till this day. Again, as if men aren't fucking emotional. Like, to be violent, is that not inherently an emotional, thing to do? Like, what a fucking idiot.
Not according to Dennis Prager, because being violent is good.
The result is that women are disproportionately
because he wants to blow up the earth
to our society. How do you come to this conclusion?
Because he's a misogynist.
The most obvious example is education. American schools teach less and indoctrinate more than ever before.
Yes, we're indoctrinated by teaching things.
I.e. teach them about how to actually think for themselves and not be mindless indoctrinated drones.
Hey, that's what Prager likes to do, though. You're going to take away his joy.
Oh, he's projecting because that's exactly what he does all the time. Is that
indoctrination? Just getting facts? Well, facts don't care about your feelings, dipshit.
That's what Benny Boy said. Feelings over facts. Aww. Now I'm gonna have to call you an anti-Semite.
No,
and I'm too busy looking for wet-ass P-word.
Over feelings, unless it's my feelings, and then my feelings overrule everyone's facts.
And most private schools are damaging young Americans to an extent and in ways no one imagined just a few years ago. Young children are prematurely sexualized. They are, for example, exposed to drag queen story hour. Oh, okay, so that's...
Here we go, yep.
Drag queen story hour. They're bringing that up again. Oh my God.
Of course they are, because apparently the existence of drag queens is literally raping kids.
Problem. In class and in local libraries from the age of 5, these feature a man dressed as a woman reading and dancing for them. Oh no!
Oh, big deal!
He'd rather than read the Bible where it talks about God committing genocide and how that's good because he promises to never do it again. Remember Noah's Ark? That's a really wholesome story that's told to children. But you need to, first of all, prove that there's a correlation between indoctrination and children being overly sexualized
evidence,
and women being overly emotional. And once you determine that there's a correlation, you have to prove that there's a causal link. But he's not going to do that. He's just saying, well, look, they're wokeifying our kids and women are too emotional, and that's the reason why. You can draw a direct line between, drag queen story hour and women being too emotional. How?
Yeah.
Is it because women, when they
only
see,
Dennis Prager could do that.
Too emotional.
And other far-right dipshits.
Is it because women, when they see, drag queens reading to kids, they think, wow, our society has come so far, that it makes me so happy it brings tears to my eyes. This would never be permissible 50 years ago. Like, is that why? I mean, this is such a fallacious argument. This is quintessential conjecture that only an imbecile would be able to fabricate. And who is facilitating
you're not wrong
this?
there, Mike.
In virtually every
Prager
case,
definitely is an imbecile.
It's a woman.
Yep.
92% of kindergarten teachers are women. 75% of all teachers are women, and 85% of librarians are women. Oh,
hey, there's a new excuse. Blame teachers now.
Yes,
all women.
Basically blaming people, blaming women. Basically, now they're going on to blaming everything.
Gotta make sure schools are privatized, remember? And that's why they blame teachers for everything.
They don't just want to privatize schools. They want to abolish schools.
Okay, so that's
and
where
replace them with indoctrination centers,
data.
where all they
so because he's established that teachers are indoctrinating
about
children,
Christianity, and girls learn how to accept being molested.
There's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense, right? Checkmate atheists or checkmate liberals. I instinctively say checkmate atheists because that was a meme for so long, but we've got to change that. Checkmate libs. And they are teaching young people to despise their country. The creator of the poisonous 1619 project is a woman. How dare...
Look, we've had a problem with the 1619 project, because it did spew a lot of stuff that was BS, but we don't care that it was written by a woman. A woman writing has nothing to do with it. That's just being misogynistic. Like, come on.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like, you could rip apart a whole bunch of parts of the 1619 project. Why do you have to bring the offer of being a woman about it? Like,
because Dennis Prager is a misogynist.
And then there was another thing too.
That's why. Oh, because he wants to blame women for literally everything wrong with the world.
And yeah, teach kids to hate their country by pointing out like history, like America did do slavery and the Civil War to abolish it. And we had other forms of racist policies, and we did a whole bunch of horrible things to Native Americans, Japanese, and all that. But no, you hate your country by pointing out that we did all that stuff.
How dare she? To feel guilty about their white privilege, or to think of themselves as victims if they are black. Even worse, they're indoctrinating them in non-binary thinking regarding sex and...
Non-binary people exist, you dipshit. That's what they're trying to teach them, you dumb fucking idiot.
Gender. These ideas originated in university gender studies and women's studies departments, nearly all of whose professors are female. No stat there, though, so you're going to have to provide us with a citation. Teachers and their unions did great damage to young people during COVID-19. They demanded
now blaming women for COVID-19.
Exactly.
And an apparent inability to apply reason to COVID-19 risk that schools be closed for nearly 2 years. Teachers' unions in big cities threatened to go on strike if schools open.
That's the right thing to do because COVID is that much of a scary threat. Of course schools should not have been open during COVID. They should have done at-home learning. It's not that big of a deal. Oh, and if you point out the risk of COVID, you're hypochondria, whatever the hell that's supposed to be. Yeah, Prager, yeah.
Okay, first of all, you're talking about their fucking supposed...
They're actually caring about kids. Apparently, unlike you, who wants them to die because you also are against the vaccines.
Yeah.
Hypochondria? More than 1 million Americans died, you piece of shit. More than 1 million Americans died due to the global pandemic. And you're just brushing that aside.
Because conservatives do not care.
What a piece of shit. In general, teachers are just radical arms
they
of the
love
Democratic
getting
Party
off on the deck.
Teacher unions are just radical arms of the Democratic Party progressive movement.
Yep.
They are overwhelmingly composed of women members and women leaders. The head of the National Education Association is a woman.
Good God! Everything
Chicago,
bad is run by a woman, basically, he's saying. Oh my goodness!
Of course, that's because of how much of a fucking misogynist Dennis Prager is. I wonder how many dead women Dennis Prager has in his basement.
No wonder he had so many divorces.
New York City teachers unions. So literally his argument is that like there are women teachers and women are, in charge of a lot of organizations. Therefore, women are indoctrinating children. Thus, women are being trained to be overly emotional.
No, women are always emotional, Mike, remember?
Make sense. Like, he's not making any sense here. The points that he's making are easily disprovable because there's nothing to like back up the claim that he's making here. Women physicians and healthcare workers are at the vanguard of ruining young people's lives at children's hospitals that push giving young people puberty-blocking hormones and opposite-gender hormones.
And now we're back to anti-trans crap again.
Yep, of course.
I'm pretty sure that I don't even know how it's pronounced, hysterectomies or whatever. I'm pretty sure that's the sex change surgery. Guys, as we keep pointing out to you, kids do not get sex reassignment surgery. That's not allowed until they're 18, you fucking idiots.
Exactly.
And then for puberty blockers,
there are other purposes to puberty blockers than just transgenderism.
Yeah, first off,
there are literally kids who go through puberty at like 8. And so they have all sorts of problems.
Yeah, early puberty.
Down the line. There are several types of cancers that they're at much higher risk of for early puberty.
Yeah.
And in fact, we're probably going to see an increase in the complications as puberty age continues to drop.
So, yeah, puberty blockers, first off, when it's not... Because just like with abortion, conservatives have this stupid belief that people just flippantly like become trans just like that. No, it's a process. First off, before you can even do the puberty blockers, which we'll get to that in a little bit, you have to be diagnosed by a doctor for like a few years before you're even allowed to go on puberty blockers that you are trans.
Exactly.
And then when they do it, they put it on you. There's almost no negative effects on it whatsoever, and you can get off of it just like that. Puberty blockers are really not a problem.
Healthy girls who say they are boys and chemically or physically castrating healthy boys who say they are girls.
They're not being castrated, you
idiot.
Right?
They're the ones doing all the
not being castrated and
First of all,
having vaginas ripped into them. You fucking misogynistic, transphobic shit
has Dennis
for brains.
Prager ever condemned circumcision? Because
no,
if we're talking
religion
about like mutilation of genitals
and yeah. Circumcision is genital mutilation, just like FGM, and it's disgusting and should be banned up till you're 18.
Children
but of course,
who are too young
conservatives
to consent
fervently support it because religion.
Does he know that more than 60% of young cis boys in this country are circumcised when they're infants? This is an irreversible procedure. Is Dennis Prager
that we had no
going to come out and
either.
denounce circumcision? Well, no, because who gives a shit? Because that has nothing to do with, trans people, so... Why, be consistent when you can just demonize trans people and claim that they're castrating young boys? No, actually, you cannot get bottom surgery until you're 18. Period. Mm-hmm. And he can
First
claim
stage is social
that
acceptance.
genitals
That's
are being
then
mutilated, but that's just
stuff,
not true.
And then when they're 18, if needed, then the sex change. Like, kids are not getting sex change operations. Like, get the fuck out of here.
And gender-affirming care, puberty blockers, HRT, these are medically necessary. They save lives. So I'm sorry, we should have the freedom to allow parents to make a decision in concert with their doctor and child about what's best for them.
But we don't like that, which is why we go after trans-accepted parents in Texas.
Exactly.
Perverting the medical profession. So now... Like, he's just straight up making things up, right? Because at first he said, most teachers statistically are women. But now he's just like, women, they're the reason why everything is bad in this country. They're at the vanguard of perverting the medical profession. Last week, an organization...
for everything again! Keep the misogyny flowing so we can keep laughing.
Called Physicians for Reproductive Health published an open letter to the nation's reporters and news editors demanding that they censor anti-abortion activists. We are asking for a commitment from the community of media outlets reporting on abortion to keep in mind the true danger that you present when interviewing anti-abortion extremists. You are giving the opportunity for dangerous lies to spread. First of all, that doesn't seem like censorship. It just seems like they want these news people to fact-check forced birthers, which I'd agree with that. As regards the demand that news outlets censor pro-life individuals, forced birther, really, you're not pro-life, you're forced birther. What you support endangers the lives of women and girls.
And we've seen numerous examples over the last few months.
Yep, and
we're going to get even more.
Professionals. Nearly every signatory was a woman. So I wonder if he took the time to count. If, Dennis Prager walks into a store and he sees that, like, most of the people there are women, does he automatically assume that that's going to be a bad experience? Like, this is deeply, deeply misogynistic, and what this tells me is that he's got some serious personal issues to work out. You need to not blame
conservatives
women.
always have a problem with women.
You need to blame yourself, and maybe you're the one who's being a little bit too emotional. If you're this, like, you have this visceral reaction to just the existence of women. If you're that triggered by women existing, you're the one who's overly emotional. You're the one with the problem, not the women, dummy.
Exactly.
So, women clergy. So even religious people.
Women in clergy.
Yeah,
Christian women
wow.
are very big. And just so you all know, historically, in Christian societies, women were not even allowed to be, like, pastors or preachers and stuff? And crap like that?
Not.
And other things too. Now women in Christianity are blamed now. Jeez.
You're bad too. Sorry, you thought that you can, win some points with Dennis Prager for being religious. Nope, you're bad too. Women clergy have been at the vanguard of pushing Christianity and Judaism to the left.
Which is actually a good thing. Sorry if you don't like that. Personally, I would like if religion didn't exist, but the next best thing is to liberalize it and all the religious fuckers would start being progressive. Oh, Prager hates that though.
He
can't
does.
Do that. Can't adopt any different values to kind of grow at the time, so your religion doesn't become relevant. That's bad. Leaving mainstream churches and synagogues increasingly empty. Of course, the increasingly feminized male clergy go along with their female colleagues, so it's not just
that men are feminized. Let me guess, because we drink too much soy now? Oh, jeez.
Almost certainly.
I'm pretty sure Mike is going to bring it up a little bit, but the bigger reason why churches and synagogues or whatever are more empty is because more Americans are becoming less religious. And I'm sure also a lot of it also is because of COVID, too, the last few years. We got to acknowledge that, too, as well. But overall, the main reason why is because we're not religious bigots like you guys were. It's you guys, in particular, in my experience, as we covered before several years ago, a study about 50% of millennials became atheists because of you religious fundamentalist treatment of gays and stuff like that.
Exactly.
It's you guys that make religion less desirable in America because you're fucking insane to all of us.
The women. It's the men who are feminized because we all know that Dennis Prager is peak masculinity, folks. When I look at him, I think, goddamn, that's an alpha. How does somebody even be that masculine, right? And women are disproportionately supportive of cancel culture, the greatest threat to free speech in American history.
You guys support cancel culture. Oh my god. Remember you're the ones that did remember you idiots over at Libs of TikTok did the death threats to that children's hospital we covered last week?
I remember that. Ugh. Hate them.
Remember you guys have a meltdown over like gay characters like in movies and stuff like Buzz Lightyear, remember recently?
Even women in in movies and TV shows and that are problematic.
You guys do the cancel culture way more than us, that's for sure.
Where's the citation for this? Are you citing polls? He's pulling all of this out of his asshole. It should go without saying, but it's undoubtedly necessary to note that there are many women doing great, even heroic things for our society, and that many men are working to wreck it.
Now it's our men's fault again. Back to the misandry.
Now it's gone back to the misandry.
Of him to add that qualifier at the end. But for those who associate
now we're back to
misandry.
So span from misogyny to misandry.
Traditionally religious life, this era in American history has provided something of a shock.
I don't want we don't want your traditional religious life being forced on us who don't want anything to do with it. How about that one?
Exactly.
That's because mentally you've never left the 1800s. And like, if you're questioning whether or not this is misogynistic because he criticized men at the beginning, substitute women with any other group of people.
Mm-hmm.
Just try it.
It's both misogynistic and
it's very bad, is it not?
Exactly.
Don't you just love when conservatives are even against people that are the majority of their base? Men?
Yep, they're against everyone.
That was an awesome video. That was even funnier when I saw it before. So, we gotta see about good old Dennis Prager in that one.
No surprise it's coming from Dennis Prager, who's every negative-ist in the book.
Oh my god, that was insane. Oh my god.
And now it's time.
Before that, though, please, people, do not become like Prager. That dude is insane.
Absolutely.
That was so funny. Yep. Now, on to the next topic.
Dark Brandon. And this is one I wanted to talk about because I actually did a little bit of looking into it, and man, this has morphed in the last few months. Originally, it was appropriating dark MAGA imagery, originally used by right-wing posters to depict Donald Trump, as well as the Let's Go Brandon catchphrase, used by conservatives to mock Biden and the media. Also used by Jimmy Dore because he's pandering to right-wingers. And so its original usage was highly ironic. Basically, it's a meme. So this meme, Dark Brandon, is a darker, edgier Joe Biden. You probably saw it with all the hysterics about Joe Biden's State of the Union speech.
And when he did the student loan debt, I remember that because Kyle even did that a lot. So So basically a meme, which, hey, you know what? Progressives and libs, let's use memes against conservatives memes in our favor. Like they always I remember that too. Like the
funny thing is, it was a Chinese one, Chinese guy originally.
Because I know that
he depicted Joe Biden as a warlord or a king with glowing eyes, and there's a tweet that a guy called Knee Zero Liberal, I don't know who that is, wrote, apparently this is Chinese anti-Biden propaganda, but it kind of just makes Biden seem metal as fuck.
Yeah, because like you all, I'm sure a lot of you probably know Let's Go Brand. I looked up a long time ago when it came out. That's basically like a MAGA way of saying fuck Biden, basically, and without getting like censored or anything like that. So now, basically, Dark Brandon is embracing that. Which, hey, you know what? There's one thing that really triggers conservatives I know over the years, and that's using their memes and embracing them.
Yep.
I remember every time people would call me libtard, I embraced being called libtard. Then they stopped saying it because it didn't work on me. And other things too.
Yes, I remember that. And then we also know that one of the biggest ones.
Oh my god! So always.
And then Yep, and then the Al Qaeda leader when he was killed on the 31st of July. Dark Brandon memes was started unironically praising Biden.
Because he actually did something good for once.
Yeah.
And funny thing...
Here's an example. Gets COVID, can't breathe, Donald Trump. Joe Biden gets COVID, kills top Al Qaeda leader. It's pretty insane that Dark Brandon sniped her. Ayman al-Zawahiri off a balcony with a drone while Trump was golfing with the Saudis.
Man, how does it feel that someone who's older and senile, probably even more senile than Trump, did all these things even with COVID? Maybe Biden is more of a man than the orangutan. Ooh, I hope that hurts.
Yeah. And then members of Joe Biden's administration have started to do it as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. That reminds me, too, something we forgot to mention, too, when we talk about the student debt relief. Remember all the idiot conservatives that were against it? Well, how about the White House's actual Twitter pointing out each one of these fuckers and showing that this person had PP loans that they got their debt relief on. This person had loan relief. This Republican congressman had no one, too.
Pretty much
over again, humiliating them.
Oh, pretty much every single one of them.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, the big one. The address in the nation talking about extremist MAGA forces.
Oh.
Remember that he had the background part of it was dark red, which drew comparisons to the Dark Brandon meme too.
And then conservative tards had a meltdown and compared him to Hitler.
Of course, because that's the only other thing they can. That's the only other thing they can do is compare everyone they don't like to Hitler, Stalin, and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi all at the same time. Because they literally think United States of Socialist Republics, National Socialist German Workers' Party, and Islamic Socialists of Immigration and Subjugation.
So yeah, if you had that speech Biden did, because I would have liked to cover it, but all the videos that talked about were like way too long. But that was an awesome speech, and if you retarded MAGA fuckers had a problem with it, even though Biden specifically said only some Republicans are MAGA idiots that are a danger to democracy. He actually even said the majority of Republicans are against them, which is honestly too far for even me. That's being like too lenient on the Republicans.
Exactly,
the majority
it is.
are actually for them. But he tried to save face for the other ones. So if you have a problem with him pointing out that MAGA fuckers are danger, perhaps, just perhaps, you're one of those MAGA fuckers. Because if you aren't, you don't have a problem with what he said. I didn't have a problem with what he said. And I don't even like him. Because I'm not a MAGA fucker.
Exactly.
Conservatives keep getting owned once again. So yeah, maybe we should embrace Dark Brendan and use it all the time. And then maybe conservatives will stop doing Let's Go Brendan because it don't work on us anymore.
Yep, that doesn't work anymore.
And then they're going to have to find another meme to use, and then we're going to embrace it. Like, no matter what, you conservative fuckers, you're not going to win against us. We on the left know how to meme too.
Yep. I remember, part of the reason why I follow Sam Cedar is because of this one guy, Aaron Dixon. He's had about 30 plus accounts. One Aaron Dixon, 6 Alabama Man accounts now, because he's made a 6th one. He had 2 accounts called All Progressives Are Child Groomers, 2 accounts of the Dissident Right, 2 accounts of Let's Go Brandon, at least 2 accounts of Ilhan Omar's brother is Ilhan Omar. And it was that sort of thing. And it was like so many of these same accounts. And you could tell it was the same account because there's like 3 or 4 accounts that said pretty much the same latest round of bullshit. And it was the same way, so you could tell it was a copy-paste. Oh, and there's one of Obama's 65K hot dog. I've got no idea what the hell that's about. But it's like...
Conservatives are dumb, as we all know. No surprise there. Alright.
Yeah.
I think it's now time to get on to the final topic of the video, and a pretty long video, too. And I think this is the first time ever we're covering them. So, there's this awesome YouTuber by the name of the Cynical Historian Cypher, and he does a lot of really, really awesome essays. And this one he did, Systemic Racism Exists in the USA. And it's almost 30 minutes long, but it's really damn good. And he just posted earlier today, and I watched the whole thing, and I think it's perfect time to us to watch it now. So I hope you're ready for this one.
Hey,
because yes, systemic racism exists, to much to conservatives' anger.
Hey, Cypher here, and that title's not going to inspire a bunch of idiotic comments. No way.
I'm in danger!
You know I'm going to need to,
down up a little bit, please. I can't quite hear it.
Cheers. I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of civil conversation down there, because that's what happens when you talk about history on YouTube. Sarcasm aside, as King Richard I decrees, bigots get banned, and I will be especially heavy-handed on this episode. Beyond that, you know Team YouTube supports historical denialism and many other forms of bigotry.
Yep. He always talks about his history all the time, and all his videos get censored to oblivion because YouTube does not like talking about history because history is too controversial for their political correctness.
Because it's profitable. So they'll inevitably...
Maybe he should have blamed Wilson for that one. For all of you who don't know, Cypher hates Woodrow Wilson, a former American president, and he always goes... When he gets a moment, he'll go, "Well, son," it's always so funny.
Demonetize this, possibly even age restrict it, as they've done with so many other difficult histories before this. And I think this is a vitally important topic. Firstly, there's a difference between systemic and personal racism.
Something that conservatives do not understand.
People say X isn't racist because some person isn't racist, or that black people can't be racist towards whites. Both examples conflate personal and systemic racism. I'm talking about the latter form, as in racism built into the system. Many folks who wave the Confederate flag sincerely believe it is not racist, merely a regional identifier.
It means everything to me. It's heritage, it's bloodline, it's respect. It's about North versus South. It's not about color or race.
But the symbol itself is racist regardless of whether the person flying it is. See the difference? Individuals being racist and a societal structure being...
I think that might be a little bit too, like, black and white to say that anyone... I mean, if people fly the Confederate flag, that the Confederate flag itself is inherently racist. I guarantee you there are going to be people that really just that fly the flag just for that stupid Southern heritage BS. Now, I'm sure a lot of them are racist when they fly, but all of them and the flag itself, I think, is a little bit of a stretch.
Racist are two very different things. Our society is still riddled with the legacy of Jim Crow, and it takes looking at how that developed throughout the last century to understand why. No, I'm not here to propose solutions
who lived through Jim Crow,
but to explain the problem. Keep in mind, though, systemic problems require systemic solutions. There's no such thing as systemic racism. You're not educational content. You're just a propagandist funded by Democrats. You're being even worse than usual, Crypto. Hey, hold on a second. Why do you have shorter hair than me? We're different characters. Okay, well, continue with your denialist tirade. The demon rats keep control over people like you, as in sheeple, because you people always have to be continually pushing this whole victimhood complex. Sure, there's some crazy racists out there, I'm not denying that, but we defeated Jim Crow like decades ago, bruh. Dude, we're a post-racial society, just like Martin Luther King actually wanted when he said, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. You just wanted to divide us by skin tone. America isn't racist. You are for saying otherwise, dude. Oh, Crypto, you perfect straw man. Not only are there lingering effects of Jim Crow, your denialism serves to perpetuate it. Politicians since Ronald Reagan, who actually opposed Martin Luther King in his day, use that quote to continue their denialism, sometimes literally imposing the kind of racist policies they ardently deny. Systemic racism exists only in subtler ways than before the 1960s, and that is what this episode is about.
Now for the left-wing straw man. Hello, Cheka. Nice to see you again.
Of course systemic racism exists. American politicians try to maintain white supremacy. That is all they do. They rig the entire system to keep people of color in subservient positions.
Hey,
you
sound
can
like
sit there
Harry
in
right
your
now.
armchair pontificating about
Sounds
the
like
glories of past
the
civil
doorknobs
rights.
and old doorknobs.
But for those who experience racism, they know nothing has ever changed. Police brutality, housing discrimination, and mass incarceration are just more of the same by a different name.
Cheka, that's not really what it is. Close, but no cigar. First, anyone can experience racism, obviously. Especially considering this platform's user base. You can find just about any form of bigotry imaginable here, including people who are personally racist against whites.
Which I've had to experience too over the years online by even stupid conservatives.
Even openly.
Racism against whites does exist, and there are a lot of blacks that are racist against whites too. Hell, there are whites that are racist against whites too.
Exactly, yeah.
For the sake of correct...
Like hell, we just saw Prager have a problem with men for crying out along with women.
Correcting systemic racism. Saying that white people are evil is obviously quite racist. But more importantly...
Oh, you just triggered a good chunk of the left saying that one.
While there are certainly bad actors, systemic racism is the legacy of overt oppression, not the continuance of it. Cheka is dishonestly conflating the tyranny of Jim Crow and slavery with today, to pretend we haven't significantly...
Yep, for anyone that doesn't get the joke of the series, when Cypher does these essays, he has two characters he makes of Crypto, who is a right-wing straw man, and then Cheka, who is a left-wing straw man, as you just heard throughout there. Like, one side denied that systemic racism existed, and the other one inflates systemic racism with everything.
Progressed is to deny the very nature of U.S. history. Ending those things were significant advancements worthy of praise, and no one should forget what it took to achieve them.
Yeah, like, America is still a racist country, but we've made strides, and that's what a lot of people on the left refuse to acknowledge.
From our bloodiest war to our most aspirational movement, and there are still many civil rights to achieve. But to pretend that the system is the same as it's always been is foolish, to say the least.
Which is
that
what
kind
Henry
of
would always
rhetoric
imply.
is grievance
I
mongering,
believe
which
that
only
literally
serves to
no
misdirect
progress has
outrage,
ever been
easily
made
debunked
unless we
claims, and
literally blow up America and invert the oppression.
And kill cops.
destroy whatever goodwill
and
cops
kill all
might
cops
have.
and genocide
But
the
we must
cops.
not discount the very real vestiges of those systems that remain in ours today. That's what systemic racism is, the creation of a lower caste of non-white Americans separated by their economic and social circumstances and kept in an inferior position through so-called colorblind laws and traditions that hinder people of color more than their white counterparts. This episode will be looking at systemic racism placed upon black people, but the burden of America's racist history is placed upon many more races. Also, remember, I can only show so much for the sake of brevity. If you'd like to learn more, there's a whole bibliography below as per usual. What we'll see is that systemic racism is not necessarily intentional, but it is there nonetheless, allowing for a caste unduly put in an inferior position.
I wonder if that would also mean that, I also think that it comes to the doorknobs, they believe that one black man, say, punching a white person in the face that's fine. But if one white person punches one black person in the face, it's like every single white person in the entire country has punched him in the face.
Yep, and likewise, when it comes to conservatives, it's the reverse.
Yep.
Jim Crow is dead, but it did not simply end in the 1960s. It was a system of segregation and disenfranchisement, both through de jure and de facto means. De jure may have ended, but de facto is a little more difficult to dislodge. That was only 60 years ago. Millions of people are still alive who can remember Jim Crow, and it has remnants.
Yep.
The Supreme Court made anti-miscegenation laws unconstitutional with Loving v. Virginia in 1967. Until that point, many states outlawed miscegenation, as in interracial relationships, especially marriage. Yet there...
And that's what we know that members of the Supreme Court want to do.
Yeah, just think about
a lot of the people who want to ban same-sex marriage also want to ban interracial marriage.
Yeah, just think about that guy for a moment. It was just 55 years ago that interracial marriage was legally allowed across the country. I'm sure a lot of you have parents or grandparents that were alive during that time. Hell, my parents were kids before that was legal, for crying out loud.
Yep, hang on, let me just check this.
Well, it doesn't matter, you're not an American.
I know, but I'm giving an example.
Against interracial relationships, as in miscegenation. The first televised kiss between black and white people was a year later on Star Trek. A full-blown black and white relationship would not be depicted
My
until
mum
1970.
was born the year interracial marriage was made legal.
Yeah, and of course, in the 60s and the 70s, interracial couples were finally acknowledged on TV as he's showing, which, for all of you who don't know, I remember that Star Trek episode that had the first interracial kiss on TV.
Yes.
It was so controversial that states in the South refused to air it, for God's sake. Like,
Yes, I remember hearing about that.
75, with the Willis family in the Jeffersons. Yet tradition is a stubborn thing, and many people retain that color line by preference even today.
Even in current-day media depictions, it's exceedingly rare to see white women in relationships with black men, due to the long-standing fears of black lasciviousness, and...
Yeah, this unfortunately is a racist trope that's really bad. That, it's very rare, and no, white women, black men face racism in both regards, if you don't know about it.
Yep.
A white woman will get shit from racists that have a problem with her being unpure now because hang out with a man who's black. But the black man also faces racism from black women because they're viewed as traitors and not wanting to be with them. They want to go with the more upper class women and other dumb stuff like that. This is something that, like, the reverse, black women and white men do not face anywhere near that. Like white women and black men have it like the worst when it comes to interracial couples. It's pretty pathetic. But it also is true that there are people that are like attracted to people of certain races, and that in itself is not inherently racist. It's what you want to do policy-wise that could be racist or not. But if someone has a preference for a certain race, that's not inherently bad. Just like we have preferences to like want to be with women, not men. That's just what we're into.
The recent acceptance of a conspiracy theory about miscegenation somehow replacing white people.
Oh yeah, that's why races are against interracial.
White genocide.
Yep, good old white genocide shit. Theory.
But so mainstream, especially among
by the way, the recent terror attack we had in New York, Lawrence Southern's white genocide conspiracy theory has incited terror attacks that have officially killed over 100 people.
I actually didn't know.
Granted, it's 101 people, but still, now 100 people have been murdered by white supremacist terrorists who believe in Lawrence Southern's white genocide conspiracy theory.
Didn't even know there was an attack that happened in New York recently. I guess it was like very small, not even
killed 10.
What?
Killed 10 people.
When was this? I didn't even hear about that till now. And by the way, look at that on the screen. Good old Cucker Tarlson.
Then our culture simply accepts that it's normal to have mostly black people hanging out with black people and white people with our so-called own kind. We remain de facto culturally segregated and worsen that rift with conspiracism like lies about the Great Replacement. The Supreme Court also ruled that segregated schools were unconstitutional with
Buffalo's, here we go, found it. 10 people killed, 3 wounded in an attack at a Buffalo grocery store.
Oh, I remember that. That was before the Uvalde shooting, like days before.
Education in
that's the one that officially put the number of people murdered by believers in Lawrence Southern's white genocide conspiracy theory over 100.
1996 decision, Plessy v. Ferguson, that said that races could be separate but equal, and it takes time to integrate. In 1969, the court was still ordering that all deliberate speed be used to integrate. This led to a national debate over whether busing kids to integrate was a form of tyranny in and of itself, which is ultimately what halted urban integration efforts.
But hey, you know who was against busing desegregation? Our current president right now.
The Supreme Court ruled that even certain
and that's why and Harry would say that proves that Joe Biden is a neo-Nazi worse than Hitler.
Integration
that's why he needs to be killed.
Which has left schools in the U.S. still extremely segregated as of 2021, leaving black children far more likely to be given a worse education than their white counterparts. Since schools are typically funded by property taxes, lower-income neighborhoods generate less money for public schools. With black ghettoization, which we'll get into in just a bit, this forces schools serving inner-city students to be more impoverished themselves, creating a feedback loop of destitution. Beyond that, many white parents facing integration chose to leave the public school system altogether. They formed private schools called segregation academies, often with government help, including getting granted tax-exempt status. That didn't end until 1976, but people have attempted to continue this private segregation anyways. Since religious schools are exempt
why private schools are a problem too, because they're used historically for racism.
To create new segregation academies. President Reagan even tried to give back tax-exempt status. Others have used a modicum of integration to get back that status. The charter school system is built from these private schools, and they began specifically to continue segregation, which once again gives white children privileged access to better education, which is exactly what Brown v. Board of Education was trying to rule against. These were direct remnants of Jim Crow, but structural racism has many other factors. Perhaps the biggest economic effect is the way housing has relegated black people to lesser housing. This is a generational problem rooted in several laws and policies. You see, housing is a form of generational wealth. People inherit their parents' estates. It is the greatest determinant of poverty in the US, and blacks are disproportionately affected. Private covenants made white-only neighborhoods, which were often encouraged by state and local governments. Though they were ruled unconstitutional in 1948, it took 2 decades before Congress passed the Fair Housing Act to enforce that ruling. This meant huge amounts of houses were segregated, and it'll take many more years to correct, even now. Federal policy began its housing discrimination during the Great Depression. The National Housing Acts of 1934 and 37 created government-backed mortgages. Through these loans, they could encourage local policy, which often meant creating racial covenants. On top of that, they rated areas for worthiness of mortgages. Marked in red were the places least worthy of a home loan, making approval extremely difficult for people from those areas. These redlined areas were overwhelmingly marked by race, leaving blacks in the inner cities unable to escape. This created a cycle of poverty, since black people couldn't get those government-backed mortgages like the rest of society. This continued into the housing boom following World War II, when Veterans Administration loans, or VA home loans, followed this redlined model, limiting the benefits of black veterans and how much they could take advantage of the post-war economy. The GI Bill also disadvantaged blacks from college enrollment, shunting them to historically black schools, overstressed by the influx of students. Education is a key factor in financial ascendancy and stability, after all. Lower income.
Yeah, home ownership really is like the massive indicator if you're wealthy or not. And blacks, by and large, do not have that same opportunity because of redline, which, even if it's no longer in place, still has the effects linger to this day, and that's why systemic racism exists.
Some neighborhoods mean there's less funding for public K-12 education. That means matriculation to higher education gets shunted to historically black colleges, and they cannot bring back that wealth to their ghettoized communities. See this feedback loop of destitution? It's founded in racist policies, even when they're no longer explicit. Despite the golden age of capitalism, black people were largely left out of it, leaving an intergenerational gap. Even once redlining finally ceased to be enforced in the 1960s, the economic effects remain today, and banks still often reinforce these long-defunct policies, thereby keeping black people in a subservient economic class. As inner cities concentrated more and more black families due to redlining, white people left in droves, worsening the issue. As suburbs became more and more common, racial covenants often made huge swaths into all-white neighborhoods. The burbs were lovely escapes from the city, and with more black people moving into those cities, white flight to the suburbs continued to pace. This left blacks ghettoized, unable to escape the inner city because of redlining, segregated by anti-miscegenation, and kept from the suburbs by racial covenants. Yet for even the black folks who managed to buy a house in the city, their troubles were not over. City officials saw these black neighborhoods as blighted. Ghettos became a target for improvement projects. As early as the Great Depression, master planners used eminent domain to dispossess black homeowners. For instance, Robert Moses redesigned New York with highways and parks from the 1930s and 50s. He prioritized cars rather than public transport, and it did rejuvenate the city, but at the cost of predominantly black neighborhoods. This process continues.
And this is what we call gentrification, which we covered before.
Yep.
Now, now here's the weird thing. Gentrification, the outcomes of gentrification economically are undeniably good. The problem is usually it leads to, like, kicking out the people that live in those areas, which are overwhelmingly minorities and poor people. We need to have gentrification that doesn't lead to that. Build up their neighborhood so they can live there and be better off than before. That's the problem with gentrification. But it needs to also happen too at the same time because it's undeniably a good thing.
Today, as ghettos are targets of gentrification schemes.
And that's something that triggers the left when I say that, but you can't deny the economic benefits of gentrification. The problem is just kicking them out. Have both things. Make it better, but keep them there.
Big corporations buy up cheap real estate in order to create upscale shops and housing. Gentrification may help cities economically, but it further displaces blacks. Because of these deplorable conditions, a series of race riots happened in urban ghettos throughout the mid-1960s, mostly related to police brutality, beginning with Harlem in 1964. They were disenchanted with the failure of the civil rights movement to gain economic mobility. People felt helpless, so they lashed out. By 1967, there were riots nationwide in what was called the Long Hot Summer. The following year, nationwide riots erupted again because of the assassination of Martin Luther King. Though he had denounced rioting on numerous occasions, he'd also argued that it was a phenomenon to be understood with compassion.
I think we've got to see that a riot is the language of the unheard.
Which is the reality,
too. That America has failed to hear. It has failed to hear that the economic plight of the Negro poor has worsened. My hope is that it will be nonviolent. I would hope that we can avoid riots because riots are self-defeating and socially destructive.
Yep, as I keep pointing out to people like Harry that actually promote rioting. It hurts you. Actually, I don't need to point out because Cypher's going to point out in a moment.
After so many riots, which had killed more than 200 Americans between 1964 and 68, the government wasn't compassionate any longer. So in the 1968 Civil Rights Act, Congress included the Civil Obedience Act, more commonly known as the Anti-Riot Act, which made traveling across state lines to supposedly incite riots a federally enforced felony. As though that wasn't targeted enough discrimination, President Nixon campaigned on law and order in 1968.
But in a system of government that provides for peaceful change, there is no cause that justifies resort to violence. Let us recognize that the first civil right of every American is to be free from domestic violence. So I pledge to you, we shall have order in the United States.
He specifically race-baited about the riots in order to sway Southern votes. The first year of his presidency, the Supreme Court struck down the old tax-based prohibition of marijuana. So the following year...
Well, we're going to get to that in a moment, but yeah. When you riot, it makes it more likely that conservatives are going to win. Because you come across as violent and insane to most people. And honestly, you kind of are. Even if your justifications or reasons for it are justified or valid, like what happened with George Floyd a few years ago, but you can't riot. You just can't. It hurts you. Just stop. And stop making excuses for it like Harry and Vosh did.
Congress passed a full prohibition, and Nixon announced, America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse.
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive.
He was not concerned with public health.
Against black people and poor people.
And when Nixon got in because of all the rioting, he would implement the drug war, which is one of the biggest forms of systemic racism.
Political suppression.
One of the biggest.
He arrested hippies, but also caught up civil rights activists. The war on drugs was barely enforced otherwise, at least until Ronald Reagan amplified it during his presidency. Laws targeted black people more than their white counterparts, who equally used drugs, just of a different and more expensive sort. Cocaine was popular, but costly. So the crack variant is diluted and smokable. Because blacks were systemically ghettoized, crack became an epidemic in their communities, making for an easy target.
There you go. Systemic racism right there. The drug war, while itself is not like explicitly racist, the way they go after it does lead to racism. And they would get locked up for doing drugs, which is not a crime. And then, of course, when you go to prison, you get a criminal record, which makes it like impossible in a lot of cases to get work, so you're back to doing crime to make money, like an endless cycle.
So it took 100 times the amount of cocaine to receive the same punishment that crack users received.
There you go, because blacks, by and large, would use crack cocaine more than whites. So, going after blacks, systemically, instead of implicitly.
Drugs were identified as an inner-city problem.
Further still, Reagan enshrined mandatory minimum sentencing, which imposed harsh imprisonment terms on people who even caught smoking pot. This led to the mass incarceration crisis we have today.
Yeah, because of the drug war. Thanks, Reagan. No wonder why conservatives love you so much. That's why America has 25% of all prisoners in the world. Now, if we legalize drugs, especially marijuana, that would go down massively. And also, if people want to do drugs, they should be able to.
Over 1% of working-age adults are in prison, and of that, 38% are black, despite comprising only 13.4% of our total population. About 1 in 20 black men in their 20s are currently in jail or prison. That was made worse by Reagan beginning to privatize prisons, which incentivized keeping...
Yeah, that was another thing too. Private prisons, which have a financial reason to lock people up so they can make money. Yeah, thanks to Republicans, we have private prisons, which is insane to think of. Because prisons should not be private at all because of the horrible financial incentives they have to do to stay open and make money.
More prisoners for profit. Neoliberalism at its best. This disparity reinforces the racist notion that black culture has criminal facets. People point to high rates of black single mothers, but refuse to see the underlying economic causation.
Which conservatives always do.
Follows poverty.
Yeah.
And blacks have a 7 times higher murder rate and roughly the same likelihood to be murder victims. With blacks ghettoized, more policing tends to be used in those areas. An idea proposed in 1982 called broken windows theory said that when minor crimes go unpunished, greater ones become dominant. This is where policies like stop and frisk, where the NYPD could stop anyone for any reason and frisk them for illegal weapons or drugs, along with zero tolerance, where a maximum sentence is issued for first-time offenders to teach them a lesson. This compounded the ghettoization problem, leading to over-policing. According to some studies, black people are anywhere between 2.8 and 3.5 times more likely to be killed by police. Around 15% of black people killed by cops are unarmed, as opposed to less than 10 for whites. This is why Black Lives Matter. They are disproportionately killed by a system of militarized police. To escape the poverty that causes this crime, blacks disproportionately need welfare. New Dealers from FDR to LBJ used social programs to lessen wealth disparity, but Reagan fully implemented neoliberalism. While California governor, he put more restrictions on recipients, eliminating much of the system through harsh regulation. People frequently referred to so-called welfare queens, who illegally benefited from welfare programs, and characterized black folk as existing in a culture of poverty. As one open letter to Reagan rather pointedly argued for the disenfranchisement of welfare recipients, these people add nothing to our economy because they are citizens of the United States. They exercise their right to vote. Actually, they are, in my opinion, no more than second-rate citizens, and because they continually draw welfare, I do not believe they should have the right to have a say in our government or how our tax money is spent. That was in California. Reagan used these complaints to cut LBJ-era benefits while he was president. This was a primary facet of neoliberalism, which caused the massive wealth disparity we have today, and it disproportionately affects blacks. Hence why they haven't risen from
Joe
ghettos
Biden.
with the so often promised American opportunity.
Fuck you in the
How can
ass.
they lift themselves out of poverty
brain
without
dead
the
moron.
same helping hand that allowed the American dream to come about in the first place? American prosperity was entirely dependent on governmental intervention. We became so because of exploration, roads, canals, telegraphs, railroads, weaponry, labor programs, the GI Bill, computers, and so much more. All subsidized or invented for the government, which has largely avoided helping marginalized people. Without substantial welfare existing for longer than just a few decades, that generational poverty remains unresolved. I did a video on neoliberalism a while ago if you want to understand the whole economic perspective further. Suffice it to say,
why every single white person needs to have money taken from them every single
During the Reagan administration, the U.S. began another trend related to that concerned citizens letter: voter suppression. Since the Voting Rights Act of 1965 eliminated Jim Crow disenfranchisement, a number of techniques have sought to limit black voting. Reagan actually fought against the reauthorization of that act in 1982. 3 years later, Jeff Sessions prosecuted 3 black community organizers for forging voter registrations. He couldn't prove the case, but this began a pattern of putting more restrictions on the franchise nonetheless. Frequent lies about voter fraud gave the stimulation necessary to
here we go again, voter fraud!
Just like Jim Crow disenfranchisement, these laws are supposedly colorblind, but they nevertheless severely impact black voters. These techniques lower black voices in government, which is what began Jim Crow in the first place. First and foremost, there's gerrymandering. Electoral districts can be drawn to subtly favor particular political parties by either diluting a vote or strengthening a district. It's illegal to create districts according to race, but blacks tend to vote Democrat, and therefore can be targeted through partisan gerrymandering. Sometimes Republicans aren't even very subtle about it. As recently as 2017, North Carolina openly racist gerrymandered, which the Supreme Court struck down.
I remember that.
Next, there's voter roll purges. States have the right to purge voters from the registration rolls if they do not use their right to vote often enough. So if they're purged, they have to re-register to vote. But sometimes this is done without notice, so they'll come in to vote the next election and be denied. This is worsened by the rules that ban several ways to register and make that registration more difficult through bureaucracy, making the entire process...
Conservatives trying to make it harder for minorities and poor people to vote because they're most likely going to vote for Democrats.
More of a hassle to all but the most engaged citizens. Just like literacy laws, this procedural disenfranchisement is colorblind, but ultimately affects blacks worse than whites due to their ghettoization. Especially problematic is the feedback loop of disenfranchisement from mass incarceration. Many states disenfranchise felons, seeing their crimes as bad enough to not warrant a say in the community. But even minor drug offenses can receive felony status. With such over-policing and disproportionate imprisonment, this predicament falls heavily on the black community. On top of that, there's voter ID laws. In many states, it is far more difficult for people in big cities to get IDs than elsewhere, due to limited access to Department of Motor Vehicle registration sites, the cost of registration, and labyrinthine paperwork requirements. Furthermore, there is no need for IDs when a voter is already registered. Some types of ID, such as bringing in bank statements, electric bills, or library cards, avoid this hindrance, but most voter ID laws merely seek to raise the difficulty of voting, so those forms are normally not allowed. And there's a bunch of small-scale forms of voter suppression, such as limiting polling places in urban areas, or restricting their resources in open times.
Yeah, this happens a lot in the South. They make less polling places to make it more difficult for minorities to vote,
which creates long lines and distant drives to cast a ballot. Georgia's recent bill is particularly onerous, for it does all of these things and more, including ending early voting on Sundays, which is when many black parishioners come together to vote, and it...
Subtle systemic racism right there.
This allows people from distributing food and drink while they wait in long lines at the polls. Democrats have countered this by trying to expand the franchise wherever they hold power. But this problem was made immensely worse by the Supreme Court decision Shelby County v. Holder, which says that forcing some states to get federal preclearance to pass new voting laws is unconstitutional. This freed up many states to pass restrictions on the franchise. So as Carol Anderson says, when 31 states are vying to develop new and more ruthless ways to disenfranchise their population, and when the others are searching desperately for ways to bring millions of citizens into the electorate, we have created a nation where democracy is simultaneously atrophying and growing, depending solely on where one lives. But it is important to note that this isn't some devious plot to disenfranchise black people. It is Republicans grappling with their steady loss of popularity. But blacks' disenfranchisement is a side effect. Just as with all of these things, systemic racism isn't necessarily a pernicious attack on minority populations. It's a vestige of overt oppression, anti-miscegenation culture, private schools, redlining, white flight and ghettoization, the war on drugs, over-policing, and voter suppression are all parts of our system that discriminates against black people. And there's much more I simply don't have time to get into, such as the way abuses within the medical profession have created a distrust of doctors in black culture, or how...
Yep, that's what happened like with blacks. A lot of them refuse to get the vaccine for COVID because they don't trust the medical community because of like the Tuskegee experiments and all that.
Yeah. Critical race theory legislation.
And then you got doorknob-like people who think, oh, you support the mandates? You're a white supremacist.
About patriotism.
And then it's like, you oppose the mandates. It can be argued you're just as big a white supremacist.
Classroom that precedes
if not more so,
serves to forbid teaching about America's racist past, therefore creating a new prejudice and ability to deny oppression as victim culture, just like how the Lost Cause operated in the same way a century prior. In fact, this episode will have plenty of commenters denying the history presented here as being critical race theory BS.
This is the sonorous war cry of a very angry frog.
This is conversely related to the likely comments from leftists complaining about the terminology I'm using in order to inaccurately deflect, deny, or just plain stop this kind of dialogue.
It's time to stop! It's time to stop, okay?
Thereby masking their prejudice with supposed defense against it. Bigotry comes in many forms. Such comments show how systemic racism easily slips into personal racism. After all, to those with privilege, equality feels like oppression. Yes, both Cheka and Crypto are direct caricatures of this lunacy. We cannot escape the past so easily. Our system has these remnants that continue to negatively affect an entire underclass, alienating them from America by their race. That's what systemic racism is, and we need to recognize that this problem exists.
Which is something conservatives need to do. So yeah, we gotta see about that video.
Very interesting.
Cypher is always very good with his videos, which is all why you all should check him, the Cynical Historian, as he's done so many awesome essay videos over the years. So yeah, systemic racism exists, and it must be acknowledged, and it must be combated against. But of course, conservatives need to get out of the way and stop implementing their policies.
Exactly.
Alright, so that will finally wrap up this episode here. So see you guys next time.
Yep.